There's a lot of cleanup work and a lot of work to close the campaign down, and then there's a lot of talk about next steps. So Shireen's not finished by any stretch of the imagination, and so we're figuring out what comes next. The overall reaction is that this was a really positive step for her. It was a really positive experience. She didn't win, but she did better than other candidates had done. As a first-time candidate, as she was, this first race, I mean, it did a lot. It did a lot. It allowed Shireen to introduce herself to many members of the community. It allowed Shireen to get her message out there, and it set Shireen up to run for something else in the near future. And so we feel really good about how the outcome. We feel really good about the outcome. Ultimately, Shireen ended up winning close to 70% of the votes in Salt Lake County, and so that's something that she feels really good about. She got over 100,000 votes total, which is something that a Democrat in these newly drawn district hasn't done, and so there's a lot to be proud of. Obviously, we would have, you'd hope to always do better in these races that you put so much time and effort into. But we looked at this race realistically before she got into it, and gerrymandering is real. This is an incredibly gerrymandered district, and where she can do incredibly well in one part of the district, Salt Lake County, 70% of the total vote. She did equally as poorly in some of the rural parts of the county, and that's why the lines are drawn the way they're drawn. Right now we're doing house projects and working on things that kind of got put off over the course of the year, going on our holiday trips and whatnot. But as far as next political steps go, we're figuring that out right now. All I can say is there are a few options right now, and Shireen is kind of weighing them, and we're seeing what happens with some of the other races, and she'll be making a choice in the near future, but she's certainly going to stay active and stay involved and going to run again. The blue wave in Utah is probably an overstatement. Is the state becoming less conservative? Absolutely. The lines and districts wouldn't be gerrymandered for such political purposes if it weren't. And so, yeah, I think that we saw a lot of positive movement in the 2018 midterm elections. We saw incredible voter turnout, at least in the suburban and Salt Lake County areas. We saw young people in those areas voting at higher rates, and so there's a lot to build off of as we move forward, undoubtedly. Blue wave is probably an overstatement. I think that there's a pretty stark divide in this state between your Davis County, Salt Lake County, Salt Lake City, and some of the your San Juan counties and your Carbon counties and these more rural areas of the state. But as far as momentum goes, yeah, there's definitely a shift happening. We're definitely seeing our state become younger, and we're seeing it become more diverse, and we're seeing it become more democratic in a lot of ways. I think with the issues of the campaign, the biggest takeaway is campaigns need to focus on issues. They need to focus on what they stand for as opposed to what they stand against. And that's something that I'm really proud of with Shireen's campaign. She didn't spend a lot of time trashing her opponent. She didn't spend a lot of time talking about Donald Trump. She talked about what her vision is, and she talked about how that vision could realistically be implemented. And we saw a lot of buy-in across party lines. That's one of the reasons that she did better, I believe, than candidates before her had done, is she didn't make her campaign so much about Democratic, Republican, left versus right. It was more about issues that affect people's everyday life: healthcare, access to education, clean air. These are not partisan issues, and that's what she wanted to talk about. That's what she'll continue to talk about. As far as issues with actual elections go, we see Utah continuously ranking as one of the lower states when it comes to voter participation. We saw some upward ticks, particularly in Salt Lake County, where I think the voter turnout rate was something like 70-something%. It was almost 80%. I mean, it was incredible voter turnout in Salt Lake County. That's, of course, of registered voters. We need to see more young people registered. We need to see more young people engage in the process, whether that be literally just casting a vote, or if that means supporting a candidate that they believe in, whether that's a Democratic or a Republican candidate, but get involved and make calls and learn about the candidates, learn about the issues, just generally be a more informed voter. And I think that that's the first step in improving our electoral process. That's something that we've kind of gotten lethargic about, probably because we take it for granted. I'm surprised that the anti-gerrymandering bill, the Proposition 4, is as close as it is. For the life of me, I don't understand how that there's opposition to that. It's about drawing lines. It's about making our districts as reflective of the people who live in them as possible. So I'm surprised that that's been as close as it's been. It's tough to say. It looks like at this point it's going to pass, but I mean, the certification process hasn't happened yet. But it looks like it's going to pass. I certainly hope it's going to pass. And I think that that's the first step in building more confidence in the system, particularly with younger voters who feel like their vote doesn't matter. Well, let's make our votes better reflective of our communities, and whether that's rural or urban. And I think that, so to answer your question, I think Prop 4 passing is something that we can be really hopeful of. I think Ben McAdams, I think likely winning. Again, it's not certified at this point, but whether he wins or loses, he has put up an incredible fight and kept this very close. And I think that there's a lot of momentum that follows the McAdams campaign that we can build on when it comes to the 2020 campaigns. So those are two things I feel really good about. I'd feel a lot better if we saw that voter participation rate tick up, and I'd feel a lot better if we saw the younger voter participation rate tick up in specifics.